here we go. McFarlane, Mortal Kombat Classic, Sub-Zero and Mileena. This is the first 2-pack out of the McFarlane Classic Mortal Kombat series. It's also the only way to get Mileena, which also makes it the only reason why I bought a 2-pack. So we gotta give points for presentation here. It is a nice looking package. You got the logo up there from the original Mortal Kombat. You got the fight printed right on the window there with all the figures, accessories, and all that kind of stuff. You got some arcade style joystick and buttons on the bottom. And then on the back you get some character profile, like portrait pictures, I guess, and then combat zones, the pit 2 and the portal. I'm not sure if that means these include backgrounds for those or what, but we'll find out. So we can think of this video as like an accompaniment piece to the big Storm Collectibles Mortal Kombat retrospective I put up a couple of months ago. At the end of that video, I started talking about how McFarlane has the license for classic Mortal Kombat, and you know, I was cautiously optimistic. I was going to see what came out, how I liked it compared to the Storm stuff, if it was compatible with the Storm stuff. We're going to get our answers here today. I do think Mileena will be very nice. Sub-Zero, I'm a little iffy, but we'll find out. As for why this isn't on the main channel, this is on a side channel, it's just because I'm kind of like shifting some ideas around, trying to figure out what I want to do with the main channel going forward, and if I want to put like reviews on this channel and between the frames and that kind of stuff. I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. Let's just talk about these figures instead. So we'll start things off with Sub-Zero. Like I said, I wasn't originally planning on getting these ninja characters because I already have the Storm versions, which I like, but you know, he was part of the price of admission if I wanted Mileena, so I just had to deal with it. So when they first showed these figures off, some of the details I noticed were a little off. So the first thing I'm noticing missing is the fact that there's no sash that goes like around the waist of the ninja characters, which is something they all had in the original games. So I don't know why they omitted that from this design. It seems weird of McFarlane to miss that detail. Apart from that, like it's weird to have just kind of like a black martial arts belt with, you know, tied in the front like that. That's not something that's ever really been a part of the classic designs that I'm aware of. But apart from that, I will say that what we have here is, you know, it's functional. It's what you would expect out of a McFarlane figure. And there's actually a couple little things about this that I do really kind of admire as far as the engineering goes. So as we look at the actual detail of the figure, I do like the way that the mask and the like gi, I guess, is painted. There is a lot of like highlight details, dry brushing, that kind of stuff. You can probably see like, you know, light brushwork over top of the quilted parts here and the mask itself. I think that is actually really cool. I don't know if that goes across the board for all of the ninja characters that are out, or if that's just this 2-pack version of Sub-Zero, because he's meant to look more iced up and cryoed out and all this kind of stuff. So that might just be on this, I'm not sure. But either way, I do like how it looks. It does give it kind of a more, it's just like a little bit more of a 3-dimensional look and adds to his overall kind of like cold appearance. I do think that is pretty cool. The neck you'll see is just a double wall peg, which you'll see is functional. You'll get the full range of motion out of it. However, I would have also liked to have seen a peg of some kind in the actual base of the neck, because as it is right now, it's kind of hunched forward. So Sub-Zero is always going to kind of have like a weird hunchback thing going on a little bit. So yeah, just be aware of that. And here you can see Sub-Zero has an alternate head with a cloth style mask, just a much simpler, you know, there's no like air vents or holes or anything in it. It's just, you know, a cloth wrapped around his face. This is very reminiscent of the original Mortal Kombat game, where they didn't really have detailed masks or anything. It was just like a ninja, you know, cloth. But I do like the inclusion here, and it's painted nice. So both heads do have eyes with no pupils. I'm guessing that's just meant to differentiate it from the single release, but it could also be like an interpretation of when Sub-Zero is using his powers, kind of like Storm from the X-Men, like on the cartoons and the movies and stuff. When she uses her powers, her eyes turn completely white, so maybe that's what they're going for here. I don't know. So moving down, you can see a gradual change from the skin tone of the arms to the ice, you know, cryomancer kind of arms that is exclusive to this version of the figure. And this is not bad. I think they did a pretty good job with it. I do like the idea. I don't know if this is the type of thing where you can swap these arms on and off and put them on the main figure. I don't know why you would if that's something you want to do, but just, you know, interesting to note. So as for the legs, you know, from the waist down, they do look pretty long proportionally, but I don't know if that's just because this like knee pad thing is like doubled up and throwing me off. What I will say that did kind of impress me and surprise me is McFarlane figures in general are known for just not having a thigh swivel. I don't know why, they just don't include them on the figures. Sometimes you get lucky and it's like up inside the waist joint there. But yeah, you can probably see you're not getting much of that with Sub-Zero here, unfortunately. But in this joint here that plugs from the thigh into the top part of the knee, it does have a swivel, which functionally serves as the same kind of thigh swivel that McFarlane Toys doesn't really give us. So I do like that they snuck that in. That does make him more posable than I was expecting, so I'll take it. So you can hit some pretty decent poses with these figures. The ankle articulation is very similar to what you would expect from other McFarlane figures. It's a little convoluted, but it does work, and you know, once he's posed, he's going to be able to stand up without an issue. You also do get some decent like side to side movement in the torso, whether it's, you know, from the waist joint or from the cut in the diaphragm. Front back though, that's another story. And here's one of the bigger issues that I have with this figure. So like I mentioned, the design of this figure leaves a little to be desired for me. And when I was talking about the issue that I have with this figure, this blue part of the overlay is attached to this black under part of the overlay. So like his karate uniform under there, the black part is attached here to the blue tunic overlay piece. So it's all just one big solid rubber piece, which makes it very hard to pose him forward and back, especially because this piece is attached on the inside to his chest. So like if you did want to push the articulation, you would start to see it like push out, and it would look kind of strange. I don't know. I was expecting it to be engineered more like the Storm figures, where like the blue part would be its own separate piece, and then this would be just the body underneath. You don't even need an overlay for it, unless they're trying to mask the articulation by putting an overlay over it just so you don't see the diaphragm joints and all that kind of stuff. But like, it's McFarlane. We're not hiding the articulation here. We got pins sticking out, we got swivels, we got every other thing that's like, you know, the lower body is darker colors, so it's a little more hard to see, but like, we've never been shy about showing our points of articulation before, so I don't understand this design. So here we got some of the accessories he comes with. So he comes with the two fists in the package, but you can obviously change them out for gripping hands, which will give you the iced up skull and spine that he has there. And then you have a separate open hand that's shooting like the ice ball out of it, which is, it's alright, it's interesting. A little more detail on the ice, you know, ball throwing hand. It's not bad. I mean, I'll probably never use it, but it's good to have, I suppose. The detail on the skull and the spine is pretty good though. There's like an eyeball hanging out, which is a cool little design that I'm guessing is probably the same as the one that comes with regular Sub-Zero, just not iced up. So yeah, pretty good. So if you happen to have the older version of McFarlane's Sub-Zero figures from Mortal Kombat 11, you can use some of those accessories, which, you know, I've got the axe here. Doesn't look bad. So speaking of the previous McFarlane Sub-Zeros, here we have the original MK11 version of Sub-Zero, as well as the ice, like frost variant. Obviously very different designs, very different styles, completely different games, but similar in terms of their scale, their proportions, all that kind of stuff. So if you do like McFarlane's scaling and their proportions and everything, you are going to probably enjoy this Sub-Zero figure just fine. He'll stand in, you know, pretty nicely with previous versions, as you can see here. Speaking of previous versions, on the right, we've got the skull and spine that came with that iced up variant of Sub-Zero, and you can see that it's basically identical to the one that comes with the new one. So yeah, give it to Daddy Mac. He's not afraid to reuse some of these old accessories, but honestly, it's not bad. It works. And since we were talking about Storm Collectibles before, here he is with some of the Storm Collectibles Sub-Zeros I have. That is the original one that came out that's designed after MK2/MK1, the original. Basically the only difference is like when you swap the masks on and off, so I got the cloth one there. This is Ultimate MK3, and this is standard MK3 with when Kuai Liang ditches the whole Lin Kuei attire, all that kind of stuff. He kind of scales with some of the more recent Storm figures, so I mean, if you do want, you know, if you don't have like a classic looking Sub-Zero like that first one there, or if you just want something a little bit different, because one of my gripes about this first one, first of all, the original Ninja bodies don't truly hold up all that well, but he's also got just a much darker blue than he ever did in the games, so it's almost like I prefer the coloring on this one more than the original Storm figure. But I don't think he's necessarily as good of a figure as these guys are, but you know, if you want classic Sub-Zero, this is a good enough stand-in. Like I said, the detail of them not having the sash like they have on all these is just, it's a very puzzling thing for McFarlane Toys to have missed. I don't know how they overlooked that detail. But yeah, obviously, you know, these are made by completely different companies. The import ones, they were much more expensive when they came out, but they came with a lot more extras. Whereas McFarlane's, you know, this version has extras and different heads and that kind of stuff, but the standard release, I don't believe it does. So, you know, it's really up to you if you want to integrate McFarlane stuff into your Storm display or vice versa. So I do think they can be displayed together and you'll probably be pretty happy with it. So now we come to Mileena. This is the whole reason why I bought this 2-pack. Will she serve her purpose in my collection? After my first impressions, I tend to think yes. I think she'll fit in nicely with the Storm figures I already have. So the draw for me on Mileena was the fact that we never got the Storm Collectibles version that was solicited forever ago and just, you know, never released. Like I said, I made that whole video about the Storm Collectibles line. You can check that out. But this is kind of my like consolation prize. It's not bad. It looks just like Mileena from Mortal Kombat 2, you know, the very kind of simplified costume that they had back then. So while I am happy to have the classic Mileena in my collection finally, I will concede that there are some articulation things that I wish we had done differently. It's like the head, you get some pretty decent range, honestly, and like not too much back because of her hair kind of blocks the way, but, you know, pretty good forward. Butterflies in the shoulder, you get the full, you know, joint up in the shoulder there so you can hinge it, bicep swivel, double jointed at the elbows there, and then the McFarlane style wrist joint where it's like a hinge that spins on the, you know, at the wrist as well as into the hand, because you will be able to swap these hands in and out. So pretty much everything above the shoulders is good. What I'm running into issues is inside the torso. She can bend back pretty far using both the hip and the diaphragm joint, but bending forward, it's another story. Probably, yeah, see, that's barely any at all. These are McFarlane figures, so you will be able to heat them up, pop them apart. I'm pretty sure it's just like a double ball joint in there. So you probably can clear out some of the excess plastic inside the torso and pop back on and get a little bit more range out of it. The legs are a little disappointing. So the double joint at the knee works great. The ankle articulation works great, very similar to the wrist. You know, you got your hinge in there, you got a swivel at the top, and if you manipulate it enough, you can get like an ankle rocker out of it, and she'll be able to hit some deeper poses and everything. As well as the toe joint you get in there too. She does look like she's wearing like lifts, like almost like platform shoes, but that doesn't bother me. I honestly much prefer this than if they were to try and give her like high heels or something that would be difficult for her to stand. So here's the disappointing thing for me about Mileena. Like I said before, McFarlane, we're not getting thigh swivels here, so she's not really able to do anything like that. But unlike Sub-Zero, where he had the joint kind of hidden from the knee into the thigh, Mileena, it's just a straight hinge, no twist, no swivel of any kind. So her legs are basically just stuck going kind of straight up and down. Obviously you can get them like out and stuff too for like kicks like that, but you're not going to be able to do any kind of thigh swivel, which is kind of annoying. She does come with her size though. They are a little bit oversized. Like I think it's just kind of, they're beefed up kind of proportionally. I would prefer them to be a little bit thinner, but I'm sure I have other size I can swap out with these if it's that big of a problem. She also does have like a cut in her pointer finger, but it seems like it's only on the right hand, not on the left, at least on my version. So I don't know if that's even supposed to be there, or, you know, I have no idea. But here's how she looks with the weapons. I think they do suit her nicely, even if they are maybe a tad bit oversized. She does also include these like energy versions of the size, which I guess are meant to be like when she's like throwing them at her opponent. Yeah, they're cool. I mean, they're just the same things in like a see-through blue. Honestly, they probably look like they belong with Sub-Zero more than Mileena, but, you know, this is just something interesting to have, a little extra, I suppose. And so here's the alternate head where she's, you know, revealed her monster face, which is, of course, classic Mileena. Basically, the whole head pops off, and then everything above the headband, so like her headband and hair, pops off of the original head. You see there, it just kind of like pops on there, and then just basically swaps onto the other head, and then you just put the whole thing back on, which is cool. I will say what I've noticed is the skin tone on the face is slightly more detailed, I guess, than the rest of the body. Like it's a very flat flesh tone on her arms and legs and everything, and on her neck you especially notice it when it like reaches her jawline. It's basically like those girls you knew in college who didn't quite know how to put on makeup, so they just plastered it all over their face, and then just it was like a hard line between their neck and their jaw. Yeah, I sat behind one of those in one of my communications class. It was interesting. So as far as comparisons go, this is the MK11 version of Kitana, also by McFarlane. They never made a Mileena for the MK11 line because when these figures were coming out, Mileena wasn't even in the game at that point. She came in like much later as a DLC character. There was another version of this Kitana that was in like kind of a reddish costume, if I'm remembering correctly, and people were using that as kind of like a stand-in for Mileena. I always did like this Kitana figure, and I think, you know, obviously apart from the very drastic stylistic differences between, you know, 20 some odd years of evolution of the characters, I do think they do look pretty good together, all things considered. Kitana's also a little bit taller than Mileena, but she is wearing heels and Mileena is not, so like you could just, you know, say that's the reason. But yes, this katana I always liked, and I was very hopeful that because of this figure being as nice as it was, like, I mean, I did stop motion with this figure, and you know, just generally I've always liked this one. But the fact that this was one of the good McFarlane releases really gave me hope that the classic Mileena and katana would also be. And you know, while Mileena is not perfect, I do like this. And like I mentioned, we sadly never did get that Storm Collectibles version of Mileena, but here she is with some other Storm Collectibles figures from Mortal Kombat 2, that being Kentaro and Baraka, and she does fit in pretty nicely with these. Like I said before, you know, the Storm figures were a much higher price point, but they came with a lot more extras, and there was just a lot more engineering and detail going on with them. Mileena is just a, you know, it's a completely different style of figure, but she is compatible, she fits in nicely with the display, and that's what I was hoping for, and that's what I got. So thankfully, she and Katana will fit in nicely with my Storm display. Everybody will be happy. Most of all, me. And here they are with Vader. And rounding out the package, we do get a couple of stands and a couple little backdrops and stuff. We'll just go over those real quick. So this is a bigger, clear, you know, circular stand with a little bit of an attachment piece there. You do get the peg, so you can just lay it down flat and stand. It's actually a little bigger than the traditional McFarlane stand, but you know, it serves its purpose. So you'll see it does come with this attachment here where you can slide it right in there like that. Now it's connected in there. Yeah, okay, so then at the top of that stand you do get like a grip and a, you know, a hinge here, so you can display your figures doing diving jump kicks or flying or whatever you want to do. Interesting. So you do get a flat plastic base as well that you can, you know, you can see there's peg holes in there. It does look like this will be able to slide in here too. If you don't want the individual stands, you can connect them in here and you can have them fighting in the air as you would. It also does come with a cardboard stand which depicts different floor pieces, I guess, from the game. I think this is backwards. Yeah, okay, there we go. So there's ground texture for one of the stages, and then if you just flip it around, you got a different one. So that is actually pretty cool. So this must be the backdrops they were talking about. You do get the portal, and then it looks like on the back you get the pit part 2. So that's cool. You also, honestly, you get like a third backdrop because of the way the package is in the actual box of the figures. And that doesn't look bad like on its own right there. So will I ever use any of this stuff? Probably not. I mean, unless I build like a display, like a diorama or something, and just have like this set in the back as like a backdrop to that. Could be cool, but otherwise, like, I mean, this is good if you just want to stick these on your shelf in front of like a stage. So this is what I mean. You basically just slide this into the black plastic stand, and now you got a kind of a cool little display. All right, honestly, this isn't bad. So overall, my first impressions of McFarlane's classic Mortal Kombat line is kind of what I thought it would be. That is to say, it's very similar to their MK11 line from several years ago, where there's a few standout, really genuinely pretty nice figures, in this case Mileena, and some where they kind of missed the mark in one or more ways, and that would be like Sub-Zero here. So you got some strange kind of engineering and strange like tailoring of like the overlays and that kind of stuff going on with some of the ninja body, particularly like the proportions are a little, it's unusual. Like he looks, simultaneously he looks like lanky, but also a little portly just because of the, you know, the way this thing falls on him. I don't know. Like I can't quite describe what I'm talking about, but it just looks slightly off model to me. I think probably, honestly, if it did have that sash piece across, like that tied around the waist, it would offset some of that a little bit, just visually. I don't know, maybe it wouldn't, I have no idea. So where Sub-Zero kind of gets, you know, a little bit minus points from me, Mileena does make up for it in terms of her design, her overall appearance as a figure. It does look very nice, it looks just like Mileena, what you would expect. But the engineering on her is maybe a little bit off. Like I said, I would have liked a little bit more articulation inside the torso, and the fact that she doesn't have the thigh swivels, it's, you know, it's just going to be more difficult to get her in poses compared to Sub-Zero, because he does have that kind of hidden joint in the knee, and so, I don't know. So yeah, I mean, just McFarlane in general, I'm not like a super fan of what they do. I know, I will say they do have a lot of very nice figures, but there's also a lot that I'm very skeptical of, and you know, like I'm basically just glad that this Mileena, and by proxy the katana that's come out, and probably the jade that they'll eventually release, they'll fit in nicely with my Storm Collectibles Mortal Kombat display. As for Sub-Zero and any of the other ninja characters, I'm probably going to skip them. unless I need something that's in a 2-pack and I'm forced to buy another one of these ninjas. I will say McFarlane's Raiden does look nice. I would go so far as to say proportionally, I kind of prefer how that Raiden looks compared to the Storm one, which I always felt was maybe a little bit too muscular looking, like a little too bulky. I don't know, just something about that figure. That said, I am glad there's compatibility between the two lines, and honestly, if you're a McFarlane fan, you're gonna like these. If you're somebody who's looking to supplement your Storm line with characters we never got from the Storm Collectibles line, I think Mileena is gonna fit right in for you. Is this ultimately what I wanted out of a Mortal Kombat figure line? Not necessarily. I got spoiled by Storm Collectibles giving us all the extra hands and different face expressions and that kind of stuff, as well as some of like the energy effects. Like Mileena, you know, she does come with these size, but I'm guessing a Storm release would have probably come with like these size that attach to her hand in like a throwing motion of some kind. I don't know, something. But yeah, that's my thoughts on these. Let me know what you think. Maybe you love these and you can convince me that this Sub-Zero is actually much better than I'm giving him credit for. Yeah, you're free to discuss. I'm interested to listen to people's opinions on these because these are brand new and I'm just kind of curious where my opinion falls compared to everybody else's. All right, my name is Captain McKay. Thank you for watching this and we'll catch you in the next one. Later on.